Hi, and welcome to Staying Strong Through Relational Meltdown. By way of introduction, I'm an expert in human behavioural science and performance from Holmes Coaching. I'm the author of 6 books, including A Balancing Act, in which I cover the fundamental ways in which we can build healthy relationships. I work with relationships all the time, pre-marriage, crisis, and post-breakdown. I've walked the road with many couples, and I'm studied in the interaction and communication mistakes we often make. One of the favourite things I like doing in coaching is helping people work their way through the mess and muddle to gain clarity and to think clearly again. Today's presentation will at least give you some of the strategies that you need to face and solve the problems that you're confronting right now in your key relationships, and try and see things from a better perspective. This session is going to be all about showing up to our own story. I once heard an attorney in Texas observe that 90% of the time when he lost the case, it was because the client never showed up. And sometimes that's physical, but most of the time they're usually sitting there saying, this isn't fair, or why is this happening to me, instead of facing up to what's really going on. Listen, mate, you're being sued, Okay, it's not fair, it's not right, but you've got to deal with what's really going on. But instead, people like playing the victim, and they like to, sit in crisis mode wondering when it's all going to end. And frankly, it isn't. Give you an example of that. I was helping a young couple, Kate and Mick, face the realities of their marriage. If you'd turned up to Kate and Mick's house, you would have seen, beautiful house, beautiful wife, beautiful car, 2 kids, a dog, pizza oven, have a beer. It all seems normal, but the truth of it is Mick was an ass. I mean, he was drug using, pornography viewing, unfaithful, verbally and physically abusive guy. And I remember walking with Kate, the truth of what was going on, saying to her, I know your marriage should be different, but it isn't. And I know he should be a better guy, but he isn't. So let's talk about the marriage you really have, and let's talk about the arguments you're really having. And work our way through. Now, thankfully, she woke up. She went through the usual cycle of kind of denial and anger and, kind of defending him and all the normal things. But then eventually she realised what was going on and thought, oh, my God, I'm a 30-something. Is there any time left for me to find a better man? And, the joy of it is she did go on to find a better man. The model that I'm going to be using for communicating in this session is the triune brain theory, which comes from a guy called Paul MacLean. He first raised it in the early 70s, and basically it talks about the 3 structures in the human brain being the lizard, monkey, and human brain. Or basically, the lizard brain is your biology, your biological brain. The monkey brain is your emotional brain, and the human brain, that blue-grey stuff that you see at the top, is your cognitive, conscious human brain, the smart stuff. So when we deal with other people, we're usually not dealing with the neocortex. We're actually dealing with their lizard brain. You can develop your message in your neocortex and think you're being very clever, but in truth, you're going to be delivering it to their survival brain. Lizards don't lie, lizards don't talk, and lizards can't negotiate. So basically this part of a human's brain is checking everything out for safety. They want to know, is this safe? Am I okay? Is this a threat? Do I need to mate with it? What is this person saying? And you've got this wonderful argument all prepared, and the other person's not listening cognitively and consciously. They're listening biologically. So I'll get into that with a little bit more detail in a minute. So just to state it in a slightly different way, Dr. Mark Goulston is a guy who works in hostage and crisis situations, the guy with the bomb strapped to him type deal. And he developed this way of looking at hostage negotiation situations where people start out in the lizard brain, the reptilian brain, where you say, oh, crap, I'm screwed, it's all over. And then they work their way up through that to the oh God phase. So once they've calmed down just a little and they realise you're not a threat and you're there to help them, they go to the oh God phase. So they say, oh, this stuff always happens to me. There's never a good outcome. It doesn't work out well. Once they've settled down and realised you're there to help and it's going to be all right, they go through the oh geez phase. All right, well, what do I have to do to get through this? In a hostage situation, what are we going to do now? I've pulled a gun on someone and this is awful. All right, well, there's a way out. What can we do here? So they settle down into the oh well phase. Now, in terms of those three layers, they're coming up through monkey brain now. They're thinking emotionally. They're thinking socially. Oh, well, here's what I need to do to get out of this. And then finally they get into the okay phase. They put down the gun, they've handed back the deal, and they've said, right, let's get to work. Let's release the hostages and so forth. So this is true with parenting. This is true in arguments. So as soon as you have attacked your partner or as soon as you have raised your voice at your child, they're going to go into lizard brain. So you can't negotiate with a lizard brain. They're thinking, are you safe? Where's the rock? How can I hide? You're dangerous. You can't negotiate with that. So you basically need to work them back up through monkey brain and back up into human brain so that they can, talk to you and negotiate. So to put that a little less formally, we're going to be working in this seminar on our way through, firstly, facing the truth about our situation, being real, showing up. Secondly, having shown up to the fight, deciding what our strategies are, deciding what we can do. Thirdly, to back ourselves and let go of the past, to realise we've got a lot of investment in things that are behind us, but what do we need to do now to survive and thrive, to get through? Fourthly, we're going to look, as I just walked you through that model there, we're going to look at ways to communicate better and to get what you want. And then fifthly, how to take care of yourself in the middle of everything and make sure that you end up all right. So let's work on you. Let's start with the first of these segments. Let's have a go at working with you. Now, I'm going to be using a case study. So we're going to be following Joel and his soon-to-be ex-wife as she goes through and trashes his life. It's a case of Australian engineer marries feisty South American dentist. She earns more than him. She has more degrees than him. She talks faster than him. She dances better than him. The two collide. They have a son. And 5 years later, it was all over. She found a new boyfriend. She wanted to leave the country. So I walked with Joel through this whole crisis situation. And one of the first things I had to say to Joel was, listen, mate, it's not you, it's her. If ever there was a situation where one person was right and the other person was wrong, it was Joel. He really honestly had done nothing wrong. He was the victim here. Nevertheless, it took quite a lot of convincing to help Joel realise that this was really going on, that she was leaving, that it was over. Then came all the guilt and shame. Why did I marry her? What was I thinking? How did I fall in love? Realising, Joel, it's okay to fail. It's all right to make mistakes, mate. What were some of the defining moments? What can you learn? Yep, she's just like every girl you've dated. Yep, she's just like the one you're about to meet and fall in love with. Let's let go of the past, the house, the memories. They had a son, so, the best thing you can do right now is face him, hold him, love him, and do your best for him. But, mate, what we have to do is honestly face up to the fact that this is really happening. This is not going to go away. The usual cycle of things, there was makeup sex and apology, but that, a simple I'm sorry is not going to put Humpty back together again. So let's face up to the facts, square away with reality, be honest, really, really honest, and say, what are our chances here? Now, it's not always going to go the way of Joel. Maybe we're talking about a friendship that you have that you want to rescue. Maybe we're talking about some underperformance and undermanagement situations at work, and you are you're facing being fired. Maybe we're talking about you and your son or daughter and a bad relationship that you have with them. Well, the first thing you need to do is be absolutely breathtakingly honest with yourself about what's really going on here and not feel guilt and shame about that. Mahatma Gandhi had a really brilliant way of looking at mistakes and problems. He once said this: freedom is not worth having if it doesn't involve the freedom to make mistakes. And that's so true. Maybe this relationship was a mistake from the beginning, or, as in the case with me and a very, very good friend of mine 10, 12 years ago, maybe they made some kind of monumental mistake, or maybe in confronting him, I made a monumental mistake. Well, the truth of it is freedom involves making mistakes. They did, I did, she did, whatever. Then we have to accept the fact that we fail. We need to get to a place where we can say, I'm a human being. I have goals. I sometimes achieve those goals, and sometimes I fail. Neither condition makes me a good or a bad person. I'm flawed. I make mistakes. I'm doing my best. Any of the listeners here today who've been to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist will be aware of the kind of advice they give, that you've got to stop catastrophizing everything and saying, I have to get it all right, and you have to guarantee me that I'm not going to get hurt. There's no guarantees. So we need to get to a place of saying, there's always risk. You can always get hurt. You might make a mistake, and it's got to be okay. When relationships go through meltdown, when we attack one another, and again, it doesn't matter if it's husband, wife, father, son, boss, employee, it's ugly. And the minute a fight starts, people get on the defensive. And when you get on the defensive, you start trying to make yourself out to be better, and you start trying to make the enemy out to be worse. So you start demonizing. We're on the defensive, we're distorting reality, we're telling half-truths, we're making it about them and their fault, and I'm not to blame. I'd encourage you to take a deep breath, to pause and just examine some of the defining moments in why this relationship is in meltdown. What are some of the limiting beliefs you hold about this relationship? Maybe it's self-esteem. Maybe you've never stood up for yourself. Maybe they are a narcissistic mongrel. Maybe you've been blind to their faults all along. Maybe you made a mistake and they lied to you at the job interview. Let's have a look at those defining moments and what you believed at the time. Is this really the worst thing that's ever happened to you, or is this just an opportunity to learn and grow and actually move on into your destiny, your ultimate job that you should be doing? It's all about what meaning you place on the events that happen in your life. So you get to choose the meaning. You get to choose what you place on them. I love this saying, it's better to let go of something than to hold on to nothing. It's a bit of a Taoist philosophy. The thing that you have may actually now amount to nothing. The job, the relationship, the breakdown, it might be so toxic that you actually have to let it go. So one of the things you're going to need to do, and of course that's really difficult in some circumstances because we might be talking about your mother, we might be talking about your son, who knows. Is it really worth holding on to something this toxic? Or can you take a break? Can you walk away? Can you take a breather and redefine your relationship? One of the things we love saying in the coaching industry is that if you can't say no to something, then you can't really say yes to it. If you don't have the choice to leave, you don't really have the choice to stay. There's no freedom there, so you can't truly experience joy. You can't experience love. You can't experience all the good things in that relationship if you don't also have the freedom to lean away. Leaning in implies that you have the right to lean out. Saying yes implies that you have the right to say no. So you should be able to have good, healthy boundaries in your relationship. You should be able to say this far and no further. And I'm talking about every kind of relationship, especially at work. Workplace bullying is a very big thing nowadays, and you have the right to whistleblow. You have the right to pull things up and say, I don't want it to be this way anymore, and I'm going to go tell somebody. Another thing that happens in relationships as they begin to melt down is that we have an awful tendency to hang on to things way past their use-by date. Think of the mouldy bread in your fridge or the stuff at the bottom of your freezer. My wife and I are just defrosting our freezer at the moment, and my God, to look at what's down at the bottom frozen in there is just horrendous. All the stuff lying around in your shed or your garage that you should have thrown out a long, long time ago. Well, relationships are just like that. We let patterns go on way too long. We let people get away with stuff for far too long, and it gets a bit like this shed. Well, it's time for a spring clean. It's time to go through that relationship and take a good hard look at it and start to work on it. All right, so secondly, let's work on communication. So this is the lizard monkey human brain. This is let's talk about communicating with people in a more effective way than perhaps we've done before. Let's just duck back to Joel's story and his soon-to-be ex-wife. So they got to a place in their relationship where they were just constantly fighting. It was tit for tat. It was this, it was that. The home, the crockery, the assets, the children were all being damaged by the toxic nature of their arguments. So they got separated, and that didn't make things any better because they started fighting via text and email instead of face-to-face. They railed at one another. We went to soccer games and were, getting into fights in the car park. The whole issue is that they were both dropping down into croc brain and becoming as mean as animals with each other. And you've been there. You've done that. It's usually in self-defense. So they gave no thought to the fires they were starting. They gave no thought to the neighbours being kept awake. They were up at all hours texting and crying and fighting. So let's work this through. So maybe your relationship isn't bad as that, but let's have a look at some of the mistakes they were making and what you can do. So one of the things I want to say is, for God's sake, stop right fighting. Okay, I'm right, you're right, I'm right, I'm right. Yeah, okay, you're both right and you're both wrong, and fighting this way, nobody wins. Because you know as well as I do that if you win an argument like that, you can still lose. There's no hug at the end. There's no intimacy. There's no friendship. You just end up right and alone. So stop right fighting and realise that each human being is acting rationally and reasonably from their own point of view. They're acting in a way that they think is right, and you're acting in a way that you think is right, and you've both got very, very different perspectives. Another thing Joel was doing was having his arguments via text. I have a big problem with this. People who argue via text, you can't hear the tone of voice. The messages are too truncated and short. I would only use text to set up a real live face-to-face meeting. And for God's sake, don't use Facebook. His soon-to-be ex-wife would have vitriolic things to say on Facebook in public, in front of their friends, no backing up. And, of course, she's writing those texts in croc brain, so she can get up the next morning and feel terrible and ashamed about the things that were going on. Only use social media and text and email to set up a real-life face-to-face meeting. The other thing is, as well as I do, when you get angry and you're in your croc brain, you say things that you're going to regret. You end up saying things that you wish you'd never said, and once they're out of your mouth, there's no going back. They're out there. So what I like to do is prepare a stump speech. A stump speech is just you preparing to say what you have to say in 60 seconds. So what is it exactly that I want to say to this person that will either restore the relationship or express my boundaries about the relationship or say to them how I'm hurt or what's going wrong in the relationship. So it really takes quite a lot of skill to get it down to 60 seconds, but practice it. Get it down to the main event. And then when you show up to the face-to-face meeting, you say, can I just say something? Please don't respond. I just want to say what's on my mind, and then we can have a conversation. Boom, and you give your stump speech. Lastly, the big mistake that they were making is having arguments when they were tired. So I'd encourage you to have a technology curfew. No texting before breakfast, no communication after 9 p.m. There are some great apps that are available for your iPad and your laptop and so forth that you can get it to manage your curfew, get it to switch off and not turn on until a certain time in the morning and not allow you access to your emails after a certain time of night. Because, Most of the arguments happen after dark or when you're tired or when you've had too much to drink. So try and get some management systems around that. Avoid doing that sort of stuff. All right, so we're in on the homeward stretch now. Let's have a look at number 3. Let's have a look at staying sane. Working on you, having a go at you being strong, no matter what's going on in the relationship meltdown. So we'll just duck back to Joel's story. Eventually they got separated and divorced, and one of the most important things that he did for his son was go and find a space that they could call home. Now, again, you might not be going through a relationship breakup. You might not be headed for divorce. You still need space. And when we start arguing with each other and one or other of us has gone to croc brain, one of the best things you can do is just leave the room. Let's say you're arguing with your son or daughter and they're all riled up and you're at each other. Just say, can we take a time out? You can go to your room. I'm going to go for a walk. Let's pick this up in 10 minutes' time. That separation creates a really beautiful moment where you begin to go from oh crap to okay, and you begin to walk your way back up through monkey brain to human brain, and they're starting to become more human as well. So Joel went and got a place that they could call home, and so they could get away from the environment. What happened to him? Guilt, shame, second guessing all came romping back. So you go for a bit of a walk and you think, oh, I should never have said that. Let's only deal with the things that we can actually control. So in his case, he couldn't control his ex-wife, and he couldn't control the fact that she wanted to flee to South America and take the son. He could control the fact that he could get the son's passport kept by the police so that she couldn't flee, because he was a genuine flight risk. Joel had anxiety attacks, sleepless nights, he didn't eat very well. So we had to work through some techniques to stay calm, to be mindful, to take care of himself, to show himself a bit of self-compassion and love. And lastly, his psychologist suggested he keep a diary, journaling his emotions and his, documenting the situation. And I thought that was really helpful advice. Let's have a look through that bit by bit. As I've already mentioned, you're going to need to find your own space. You're going to need to get away from the meltdown and find your own space. One of the pieces of advice that Joel's psychologist gave him, and I thought it was really good as well, was find a sacred space in your home. It doesn't have to be big, just a corner, could be, a bookshelf area by the window, a couch, somewhere that you can go calm down. Now, for a child, of course, we might call this having a time-out chair or, sending them to their room. But it's got to be a sacred space and a place that you're not going to go and intrude in and plomp yourself down on their bed and intrude. They need boundaries too, right? So go find a sacred space. As I mentioned, part of the kind of anxiety-reducing strategy, or one of the ways that I helped Joel, was to only think about the things that he could actually control. If you've read Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you'll be familiar with the model of control, influence, and concern. So people who focus on things that they can control become more and more in control. People who focus on things that they have no control over get more and more out of control. So you can't control the weather. You can control taking an umbrella when it's raining. You can't control his ex-wife trying to leave the country. You can control taking hold of the passport and giving it to the police. You can't control interest rates. You can control the size of your mortgage. So try not to use ultimatums on people unless you're willing to back them up with action. Try and only deal with the things you actually have control over and not the illusion of control. You can't actually affect people's opinions. You can't affect people's buying decisions. You can't control people's decisions to stay or leave or get a divorce or run away from home. You can control your own emotional state, your own behaviour, and the interactions that you have, the timings of the arguments that you have and the interactions and so forth. So try and focus on the things that you actually have control over. Let's have a look at the Holmes and Ray social readjustment rating scale. I don't know what relational meltdown you're going through, but if it's one of the key relationships in your life, say mum, dad, children, spouse, loved one, best friend, the death of a loved one ranks number one in the most stressful things that can happen to you. Getting a divorce, and divorce doesn't just mean husband and wife separating, that means the end of or the truncating of a really good or beautiful relationship. That's the second most stressful thing that can happen to you. Marital separation, third, a jail term, fourth, and the death of a family member, fifth. So if you have a look at the kind of stress that human beings can put each other through, you can see now that if you're going through the breakup of a key primary relationship, you're going to be totally stressed out. So give yourself a break. Realise that this is an incredibly stressful time, and try not to throw in, half a dozen other things like having a career change or moving house or deciding to, move to another country. Try not to throw those stressful things in as well as these. As I mentioned, Joel was going to have to learn some anxiety reducing and stress reducing techniques. You may already have some of those, so maybe you do yoga, maybe you know how to meditate, maybe you love to pray, maybe you've learned some breathing techniques. I'd really encourage you to learn about mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR. Mindfulness is essentially a Buddhist belief of being able to separate yourself from the circumstances and events of life and look at them dispassionately. So you're able to kind of distance yourself from yourself and look in on your world and say, oh, these things are happening to me. That's interesting. It's neither good nor bad. It's just happening. I wonder. I'm going to be curious about those things. I'm going to try and find something humorous about these things. I'm going to separate myself from this argument right now and take a look at this individual who's yelling at me and be curious about that person and pretend that this is a scientific experiment. I'm going to look at them and kind of laugh and imagine that they're perhaps just a little child and that they're ranting and raving. You can already feel the humour rising up in the situation as you look. So mindfulness is a really fantastic way to reduce stress. Another one is, breathing techniques. So if you breathe in for 6 seconds and then breathe out for 6 seconds, there's a little neuron in the upper left-hand quadrant of your heart that is checking blood pressure all the time. And if you breathe in for 6, and that's longer than you think, let me just count that for you. So breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and breathe out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It takes a long time. You're actually resetting the autonomic nervous system and causing all of the ANS to realign. So stomach, heart, the positive and negative sides of the ANS, the brake and the accelerator sides, both resetting, uplining to the brain, and you will experience calming. So whatever techniques you're going to use, you need to also learn to show yourself sympathy. So one of the things I like saying to my clients is, you deserve as much compassion, at least as much compassion as a stray dog. So if a stray dog or a cat came along to your house, you might give it milk, you might give it a pat, you might give it shelter from the rain, you would certainly show it love, and perhaps you would pick it up and take it down to the pound. You, as a human being, deserve at least that much compassion from yourself. So are you feeding yourself properly? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you receiving compassion and love and a hug from yourself? Are you giving yourself any kind of reward for making it through? Even a dog deserves that that's been stray, so do you. As I mentioned, Joel's psychologist also encouraged him to journal, and I think journaling is a really fantastic strategy. So try and keep a diary of how you feel. This, if you're going through a divorce, may end up being a lifesaver because you can actually quote the facts of the situation as they happen. Try and track your self-talk. Give yourself visual reminders of having a better conversation with yourself. Write down how you're feeling. Write down what you're eating and how much alcohol you're drinking and how much water and how much rest, so that you can look back and see whether you're making improvements or not. So just bringing it home now, I would love for you to survive this relational meltdown. I would love for you as a parent to survive the wild teenage years of your children. I would like you as a friend to survive the turmoil of another friend going through cancer. I would love you as a spouse to work through and survive the struggle and the meltdown that takes place sometimes in marriage. But just existing is not really enough. You exist, but do you live? I'd rather that you begin to develop and begin to dream and begin to wonder what life could hold for you. How can we thrive instead of just surviving? What can we do to move forward? This is actually the first chapter in a new book. It's a new day. It's a new start. It could be a new start for your relationship. It could be a new start for you because you finally set boundaries and you're not being so codependent. It could be a new day for the relationship because it's over and you need to go find a new loved one or friend or spouse, or your friend dies of cancer. It's terrible on one hand and it's amazing on the other hand. This could be the first chapter in a new book, a new day, a new start, a new life. And there's always a positive side to the negative things. And frankly, if you've been keeping a good journal and you've been working your way through, truth is often stranger than fiction. You might actually end up writing a book about it. And I can't tell you the number of times I've told clients, you should really go and write an ebook and tell your story out there on the internet. All right, so here's my offer to you. If you want to stay in touch with us, we do offer relationship coaching. I want you to go to fraserholmes.com/relationship and you'll see our relational coaching section there. You'll get a pop-up menu and it'll give you a full rundown of this presentation. There's PowerPoint there and there's also an article. I invite you to come on a journey, sign up to our newsletter, stay in touch with us because we produce webinars, seminars and so forth every month. Plenty of good contact and I look forward to you getting in touch with me. If you want to write to me, I'm at robert@fraserholmes.com. That's Fraser with a Z and Holmes with an L. Look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.